Love in the Wild West by Nolan Barrett. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Silver Creek, Colorado, as Catherine Mitchell stepped down from the stagecoach. Her legs trembled beneath her traveling skirts, protesting the 3-day journey from Boston. The frontier town sprawled before her, a far cry from the refined streets of her hometown, but she lifted her chin with determination. She hadn't traveled 2,000 miles to falter now. "Miss Mitchell?" A weather-beaten man in his 60s approached, removing his hat. "I'm Dr. Warren. Welcome to Silver Creek." Catherine smiled at her father's old friend, grateful for a familiar face. "Thank you for taking me on as your nurse, Doctor. I'm eager to begin." "Well, we surely need the help." He gathered her bags, leading her down the wooden sidewalk. "Though I must warn you, frontier medicine isn't quite what you're used to back east." She was about to respond when the thunder of hoofbeats filled the street. A group of riders approached at a gallop, their horses kicking up clouds of dust. At their head rode a man who commanded attention, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a face that seemed carved from granite. Unlike his companion's wild riding, he sat his horse with natural grace. "That's Luke Hawkins and his ranch hands," Dr. Warren explained, following her gaze. "He owns the Double H, biggest spread in the territory. Good man in a tight spot, though he keeps to himself since losing his wife 5 years back." Catherine watched as Luke Hawkins reined his horse to a stop outside the general store. There was something compelling about him, a quiet strength in the way he carried himself. When he dismounted, she noticed he favored his left leg slightly. "Caught a bullet in the war," the doctor said, reading her professional assessment. "Never healed quite right, though he won't admit it troubles him." The rancher must have felt their scrutiny. He turned, and for a moment, his eyes met Catherine's. Something electric passed between them, making her breath catch. Then he touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement and disappeared into the store. "Come along," Dr. Warren said kindly. "Let's get you settled before nightfall." The next few weeks passed in a blur as Catherine adjusted to frontier life. The work was demanding but rewarding. She treated everything from mining accidents to childbirth, earning the town's respect with her capable hands and calm demeanor. Still, she couldn't help noticing whenever Luke Hawkins rode into town, though their paths rarely crossed. That changed on a stormy night in late October. Catherine was alone in the clinic, organizing supplies, when urgent pounding rattled the door. She opened it to find Luke supporting one of his ranch hands, a young man pale with pain and blood loss. "Caught his arm in some machinery," Luke explained tersely. "Need your help, Miss Mitchell." They worked together for hours, Luke assisting as she cleaned and stitched the terrible wound. His hands were steady, following her instructions without hesitation. By dawn, the young man slept peacefully, danger past. "You did fine work tonight," Luke said quietly as they washed up. "Most women would have fainted at the sight." "I'm not most women, Mr. Hawkins." She met his gaze steadily. "And I believe you already knew that." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That I did." He dried his hands and reached for his hat. "Much obliged for your help, Miss Mitchell." "Catherine," she offered impulsively. "My name is Catherine." He paused at the door, something warm flickering in his eyes. "Catherine," he repeated softly, as if testing the feel of it. "I'm Luke." Then he was gone, leaving her wondering what had possessed her to be so forward. Their paths began crossing more frequently after that night. Luke would tip his hat when they passed on the street, sometimes stopping to exchange a few words. Catherine found herself looking forward to those brief encounters, drawn to the quiet intelligence in his gray eyes and the rare smile that transformed his stern features. One crisp November afternoon, she was gathering herbs on the outskirts of town when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her look up. Luke sat easily on his big bay stallion, silhouetted against the setting sun. "Bit far from town, aren't you?" he asked, swinging down from the saddle. "The best yarrow grows wild out here," she explained, showing him the plants she'd gathered. "It's excellent for treating wounds." He nodded, studying the delicate white flowers. "My grandmother used to gather herbs. Said they held more healing power than any doctor's medicine." He glanced at her, though maybe not more than a certain Boston-trained nurse. Catherine felt warmth bloom in her cheeks at the compliment. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." She was. He was quiet for a moment, lost in memory. Then he seemed to come to a decision. "Would you like to see more of the territory? I know some places where other healing plants grow." Her heart quickened at the invitation. "I'd like that very much." The next Sunday, Luke arrived at the clinic with 2 horses. They rode into the foothills, the autumn air crisp and clean around them. Luke proved to be a knowledgeable guide, pointing out various plants and their uses. Catherine found herself sharing stories of her training in Boston, and he spoke of his own experiences as a Union cavalry officer. "The war changed everything," he said quietly as they rested beside a clear stream. "Made me see what really matters in life." His eyes held hers. Truth. Honor. Having someone to share it all with. Catherine's heart thundered in her chest. "And have you found that someone, Luke?" "I thought I had, once." He looked away, pain flickering across his features. "Sarah, my wife, she was everything to me. Losing her nearly broke me." "I'm so sorry," Catherine said softly, understanding now the shadows that sometimes darkened his eyes. "For a long time I didn't think I'd ever want to risk my heart again." He turned back to her, something vulnerable in his expression. Until now. The weeks that followed were filled with quiet moments of growing closeness. They rode together whenever time permitted, sharing conversations that ranged from philosophy to frontier life. Luke began stopping by the clinic with small gifts, wild herbs he'd found, fresh baked bread from his ranch cook, a fine leather medical bag to replace her worn one. The town noticed their courtship, of course. Catherine endured knowing looks from her patients, while Dr. Warren merely smiled and said it was about time Luke Hawkins started living again. Even Luke's ranch hands seemed pleased, treating Catherine with careful respect whenever she visited the Double H. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Catherine struggled sometimes with Luke's protective instincts, while he had to adjust to her independent nature. Their first real argument came when she insisted on riding out alone to treat a sick child during a snowstorm. "It's too dangerous," Luke argued, his jaw set stubbornly. "Let me take you in the wagon." "That would take twice as long," Catherine countered. "I'm perfectly capable of making the ride myself." "I know you're capable," he growled in frustration. "That's not the point." "Then what is the point, Luke?" He ran a hand through his hair, struggling to express himself. "The point is, I can't bear the thought of something happening to you. I've lost one woman I loved, I couldn't survive losing another." The words hung between them, his unplanned declaration stealing Catherine's breath. Luke looked stricken, as if he'd revealed more than he meant to. "Then come with me," she said softly, holding out her hand. "Be my partner, not my protector." Understanding dawned in his eyes as he took her hand. From that day forward they faced challenges together, each respecting the other's strengths. Winter settled over Silver Creek, transforming the landscape into a glittering wonderland. On Christmas Eve, Luke invited Catherine to dinner at the Double H. The ranch house was warm and welcoming, decorated with pine boughs and candles. After the meal they sat before the fire, comfortable in each other's company. "I've been thinking," Luke said finally, taking her hand, "about the future. About what matters most." He met her eyes, all his careful reserve stripped away. "I love you, Catherine Mitchell. Will you marry me?" Catherine's heart soared. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." They were married in the spring, when wildflowers carpeted the hills around Silver Creek. Dr. Warren gave the bride away, and Luke's ranch hands cleaned up nicely in their Sunday best. The couple exchanged vows beneath an arch of early roses, their words simple but heartfelt. Catherine continued her nursing work, though now she divided her time between the clinic and the Double H. She and Luke built a life together based on mutual respect and understanding, each making the other stronger. They had their share of challenges, droughts, harsh winters, and the everyday trials of ranch life, but faced them as partners. Years later, Catherine would look back on that first sight of Luke Hawkins riding into Silver Creek and marvel at how far they'd come. Their love story wasn't like the romantic novels she'd read as a girl, full of dramatic declarations and grand gestures. Instead, it was built on smaller moments, shared laughter, quiet understanding, and the daily choice to face life's adventures together. In the end, she realized that was the greatest romance of all,